The grand palace stood in silence, its tall golden pillars rising like watchful guardians over the hall. Hundreds of candles burned along the walls, casting soft light on the polished marble floor. Nobles in dark robes and glittering gowns sat in perfect rows, their eyes fixed on the throne at the far end of the chamber. The monarch's presence weighed heavy on everyone, yet it was not the king alone who held their attention that day. All waited for her, the young woman who would step forward and change the tone of the court forever. Kate walked slowly down the long aisle, the red velvet train of her gown brushing across the stone behind her. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She had been raised for quiet moments, not for war, yet the war outside had forced her into this place. Beyond the palace walls, armies gathered on the borders, and rumors carried tales of betrayal. Inside, whispers of doubt circled her name, but none dared to speak them aloud as she moved closer to the throne. The monarch, draped in a black and crimson robe, stood tall. His crown glimmered in the candlelight, and his sharp eyes studied Kate's every step. Behind him, banners of the realm hung, their colors heavy with the memory of victories long past. The nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces pale with fear of the battles yet to come. For years, the kingdom had known peace, but now the air itself felt charged, as if lightning waited to strike. Kate's thoughts wrestled with doubt as she reached the center of the hall. She had never been meant for this moment. She was not a general, nor a warrior, but the world beyond the palace did not care. Villages burned. Soldiers fell. The kingdom's survival demanded a symbol, someone who would stand for loyalty and unity. Somehow that duty had fallen on her shoulders. She lifted her eyes and saw the audience watching in silence. Rows of nobles in velvet and silk leaned forward, as though her every breath might reveal the future. Their faces were a mixture of doubt, hope, and fear. To them, she was an untested figure, placed before them at a time when mistakes could cost everything. Kate straightened her back, willing herself to appear steady. The monarch raised a hand, and the hall felt even quieter. His voice was deep and steady, echoing across the chamber. Today, before this court and before the eyes of the realm, you stand as one who must prove loyalty. War approaches our gates. Treachery stalks our shadows. And still, our people must believe that hope remains. Tell me, Kate, will you kneel to the crown, not as a servant, but as one who bears the weight of our survival? The question struck her like a blade. It was not a command but a challenge. She felt the tension in the air, the nobles waiting for her to falter. She thought of the villages, of the people who whispered prayers at night for peace to return. Her throat tightened, but her voice, when it came, was clear. I will stand with the crown. I will bear what must be borne. A ripple moved through the audience. Some nodded in respect, others narrowed their eyes, doubting her strength. Kate lowered her gaze for a moment, collecting herself. Her fingers tightened around the folds of her gown. She knew words would not be enough. The kingdom would demand more proof of action, proof of loyalty, proof of courage. The monarch studied her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slight motion of his hand, he signaled for her to bow. The moment was simple, yet heavy with meaning. Kate inhaled slowly, her heart drumming louder than the silence around her. She understood that this was not only about respect, it was about survival. The audience wanted to see whether she would break, or whether she would stand as a pillar in their darkest hour. As she prepared to bend, Kate felt the weight of the entire hall pressing upon her. The unexpected war outside had found its way into the heart of the palace. And here, beneath golden light and silent stares, the first battle had already begun, not with swords, but with the courage to lower her head and hold her ground. The silence in the great hall felt endless, stretched thin like a thread ready to snap. Kate stood still in the center, her gown catching the glow of the candles. The monarch's signal lingered in the air, and the nobles leaned forward, their eyes fixed on her every move. She bowed slowly, her head lowering with a grace that seemed almost unnatural under the weight pressing against her shoulders. The hall stayed quiet, as if the entire kingdom held its breath through them. When she rose again, her eyes met the monarch's. His face showed no warmth, no smile, but his pause spoke louder than any word. For a fleeting moment, even the king himself seemed struck by her calm. Then he stepped forward, his heavy robe sweeping across the floor, and his voice carried through the chamber. "You will swear the oath now," he said, his words sharp as steel. "Not to me alone, but to the people, to the crown, and to the land we defend. If your loyalty fails, it will not be me who judges you, it will be history itself." Kate's throat felt dry. She knew what the oath meant. It was not simple words repeated for ceremony. To swear it was to bind her life to the kingdom. If she broke it, she would not only lose honor but also invite ruin upon her family, her name, and perhaps the fragile peace inside these walls. Still, she stepped forward. The monarch's guard, tall and stern, held out an ancient sword. Its blade shimmered faintly in the candlelight, etched with runes so old few remembered their meaning. The sword had passed through the hands of countless oaths before her. Each time it had judged the speaker's truth. Whispers in the court claimed it could reveal a heart unworthy. Kate placed her hands gently upon the steel. The cold touch ran up her arms, and for a moment she thought she felt it pulse like a living thing. She kept her gaze steady. The king's voice rang again. "Repeat after me. I swear, by blood and by breath, to defend this crown and land, to stand loyal when others fall, and to remain steadfast when fear commands retreat." Kate drew in a slow breath. Her voice, soft but unbroken, filled the hall as she repeated each word. With every phrase, her courage grew. By the time she reached the last line, she spoke with such strength that even the whispers at the back of the hall ceased. "I swear," she finished, her hand still upon the sword. The moment hung suspended in the golden hall. The runes on the blade glimmered faintly, then faded. The sword accepted her oath. The nobles stirred, some nodding, some muttering, others hiding frowns behind jeweled hands. Not all believed she was ready. Not all wanted her there. The monarch leaned closer, his deep eyes fixed on her. "Then let it be remembered. From this day, you are bound to the survival of this kingdom. Should war claim us, you will stand. Should betrayal wound us, you will not falter. You will bear the weight, whether you wish it or not." Kate lowered her head again, not in weakness but in quiet acknowledgement. She could feel the eyes of hundreds burning into her. She had given her word. Now there was no turning back. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a low tide of whispers. Some spoke of courage. Others spoke of folly. A few nobles exchanged sharp glances, their lips curled with doubt. They feared she was too young, too untested, too soft for the storm that raged beyond the palace gates. Kate turned slowly, facing the audience. For the first time, she looked not at the king or the throne, but at the people who had come to judge her. She held her chin high, and though her hands trembled slightly at her sides, her eyes were steady. "I will not fail you," she said softly. Her words carried farther than she expected, and the hall fell quiet once more. In the far corner, an old noblewoman leaned toward her companion. "She speaks well," the elder whispered, her voice low but sharp. "But words are easy. Let us see what she does when steel meets fire." The monarch raised his hand once again. The whispers died at once. He stepped back toward his throne, his heavy robe trailing across the floor. "The oath is sworn," he declared. "Let all present bear witness." The hall thundered as the guards struck their spears against the marble floor in a solemn rhythm. The sound echoed like a heartbeat through the chamber. Kate's own heart matched the beat, pounding stronger with each strike. As the ritual ended, she felt the true weight of her vow pressing down. It was not the sword that bound her, nor the king's command. It was the knowledge that outside these gilded walls, war was moving closer, and soon she would be tested in ways neither she nor the court could yet imagine. Kate turned her gaze upward. The crown above the monarch's head shimmered in the candlelight. She had stepped into a path from which there was no return. The oath had been spoken, and the kingdom now expected her to live and perhaps die by it. And somewhere, hidden in the crowd, unseen eyes watched her closely, already plotting how to use her vow against her. The palace walls glowed with candlelight long after the oath was sworn, but the warmth of gold and fire could not push away the unease that clung to the air. The nobles filed out of the grand hall in silence, their jewels glittering but their faces pale. They spoke in hushed voices, their eyes darting toward Kate as though her very presence unsettled them. She had spoken the oath with strength, but not everyone welcomed it. Kate remained behind, her hands still trembling from the weight of the ancient sword. The monarch had returned to his throne, his expression unreadable. He neither praised nor doubted her. That silence troubled her more than harsh words ever could. As the last echoes of footsteps faded, one noble lingered near the pillars, his cloak pulled tightly around him. His lips curved into the faintest smile as he whispered to another figure hidden in the shadows. "She has sworn. Good. Now we will see how long she lasts." Kate did not hear the words, but she felt the weight of unseen eyes. Betrayal had a scent in the palace. It was the faint perfume of smiles that hid daggers. She sensed it already creeping closer. Later that night, she walked through the palace corridors alone. The marble floors reflected the torchlight, and the silence made each step seem louder than the last. She paused when she reached a wide balcony that overlooked the darkened city. Far beyond on the horizon, she saw faint lights glowing, the campfires of armies waiting at the border. The war was no longer a rumor. It was a shadow creeping closer every hour, her breath caught. She had given her oath, but what could she truly do? She had no sword of her own, no army under her command. All she had was her word and the eyes of an entire court waiting for her to fail. "Doubt weighs heavy on you," came a voice from behind. Kate turned sharply. A tall figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Lord Rennick, a powerful noble with silver hair and a sharp tongue. His reputation was one of cunning whispers and hidden alliances. Few trusted him, yet none dared challenge his influence. "My lord," Kate said carefully, dipping her head in respect. Rennick's thin smile grew. "You swore well today." Strong voice, steady hands. The court was impressed. "Or at least, enough to watch you closely." She studied his face, searching for the meaning beneath his words. "And you, my lord? Were you impressed?" "Ah," Rennick chuckled softly. "Impressed? Perhaps convinced?" "Not yet. You carry yourself like one who believes in duty, but belief alone does not hold a kingdom together. Power does. And power, dear Kate, is not in oaths. It is in control of people, of secrets, of fear." Her stomach tightened. His tone was smooth, but behind it lurked something sharp. "Then why speak to me, if you doubt me?" "Because," Rennick whispered, stepping closer, "you are now a piece on the board. Pieces can rise, or they can be sacrificed. I only wish to know which you will be." Before she could answer, he bowed slightly and retreated into the shadows, his cloak sweeping behind him. The corridor grew silent once more, but his words clung to her like chains. That night, Kate found little rest. She dreamed of whispers echoing through the hall, of faces turning away from her, of a blade slipping silently between her shoulders. She awoke with her heart racing, convinced the betrayal she feared was not a distant possibility, but an approaching certainty. The next morning, the court gathered again. This time, the hall was filled not with ceremony, but with restless discussion. Maps of the kingdom were spread across long tables. Generals spoke of enemy forces, of crumbling alliances, of spies within their own walls. Kate sat quietly at the edge, listening as voices rose and tempers flared. At last, one of the nobles turned toward her, his voice cold. "You swore loyalty, yet what do you bring us now? Words will not stop armies. Shall we place our hope in a bow and a smile?" The hall rippled with uneasy laughter. Kate felt her face grow warm, but she did not look away. "Hope is not mine to give," she replied, her voice steady. "But loyalty is. And when the time comes, I will prove it not with words, but with what I am willing to bear." The laughter died. A few eyes softened with respect, but others narrowed with suspicion. Somewhere in the crowd, Lord Rennick watched her, his thin smile returning. The monarch, silent through it all, finally spoke. "Let her be tested. In times of war, words must walk in the fire. We will see if she emerges." The hall fell quiet. Kate's heart pounded, but she did not bow her head. She had sworn the oath. Now she understood what came next. Shadows of betrayal moved in silence around her, but she would face them. And as she stood beneath the gilded ceiling, she realized the truth. Her greatest battle would not be fought against armies outside the walls. It would be against the knives waiting in the dark corners of the palace itself. The morning sun rose pale over the palace, casting long shadows across the marble floors. The air inside the royal court was thick with unease. Generals whispered over maps, nobles exchanged sharp glances, and rumors moved like smoke through the hallways. Kate felt all of it pressing against her, yet she stood tall, her vow still fresh in her mind. She had sworn loyalty, but now the time had come to prove it. The monarch summoned her before the council. His heavy crown rested upon his brow, his voice deep and calm as always. "You spoke of loyalty," he said, his eyes piercing into hers. "Now you must show it. A message has been intercepted. Enemy scouts cross our borders. One of our villages lies in danger. You will go, with no army at your back, and bring back proof of their safety. Or proof of their loss." A ripple of surprise swept through the court. A young woman, untested, sent into danger alone? Some whispered it was madness. Others whispered it was a trap. Kate bowed her head, her voice steady. "I will go." Lord Rennick's thin smile returned from across the chamber. "Ah, courage," he murmured to those beside him. "But let us see if courage will walk her home." The journey began at dawn. Kate rode out from the palace gates with only a horse and a single guard assigned by the king. The land beyond the capital stretched into rolling fields, quiet but tense. Smoke rose faintly in the distance, and her stomach tightened at the sight. Her guard, a young soldier named Ulrich, kept his hand close to his sword. "They send you into danger too soon," he said, his tone careful. "The nobles want you to fail. Some want you to never return." Kate glanced at him. His words matched her fears, but she spoke calmly. "Then let failure find me on the road, not in the palace. If I cannot face shadows beyond the walls, how can I face those within?" They pressed onward. Hours passed in uneasy silence until they reached the outskirts of the village. The smoke was stronger here. Wooden homes stood half-burned, the smell of ash thick in the air. No laughter of children, no sounds of market stalls, only silence. Kate dismounted, her boots crunching over blackened earth. She walked slowly down the empty street, her gown trailing over the dirt. Every step echoed, and with each one her heart grew heavier. Was she too late? Then, from behind a broken wall, a small sound reached her ears. She froze. A child's cry. Kate hurried forward, finding a girl no older than 7 huddled in the corner. Dirt streaked her face, and her eyes were wide with fear. When Kate knelt beside her, the child flinched. "It's all right," Kate whispered softly, lowering her voice as if soothing a bird. "You're safe now. Where are the others?" The girl pointed toward the hills beyond the village. "They ran when soldiers came. Some were taken, some hid." Kate's heart clenched. The enemy had indeed crossed the border. This was no rumor, it was war creeping closer with every hour. Before she could speak again, Arik hissed a warning. Shapes moved at the edge of the burned houses. Enemy scouts, their armor dark, blades glinting. They had stayed behind to watch the ruin. Kate's breath caught. She had no sword, no skill with one even if she carried it. Yet the child's hand clung to hers, and retreat was not an option. Arik drew his weapon, ready to fight, but he was only one against many. Kate stepped forward, raising her chin though fear shook her bones. Her voice rang across the empty street. This child is under the crown's protection. Harm her, and you declare war not only on soldiers, but on the throne itself. The scouts paused, uncertain. Perhaps they expected screams, not defiance. Ulrich took the chance, swinging his blade to drive them back. After a tense moment, the enemy withdrew, vanishing into the hills. Kate stood still, her chest heaving. The child pressed against her side, trembling but alive. She bent down, brushing dirt gently from the girl's hair. "You're safe now," she repeated softly, though inside she knew safety was fragile. Thin as glass. By nightfall, Kate and Ulrich led the survivors they found back toward the capital. Villagers walked with weary steps, carrying little more than hope. When the palace gates rose before them, the court was waiting. Kate entered the hall with the child at her side, her gown torn, her hands streaked with ash. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The nobles leaned forward, their eyes wide. "The village still stands," Kate said firmly, her voice carrying. "Not whole but alive. The people are safe. I bring them back, because the crown's word must mean protection." The monarch's gaze softened for the first time. He did not smile, but his pause was filled with meaning. The guards struck their spears against the floor once more, not in ritual, but in respect. But across the chamber, Lord Rennick's eyes narrowed. His thin smile faded, replaced by something sharper. He had seen enough to know Kate's loyalty was real. And that made her dangerous. The test had been faced, and she had not faltered. Yet betrayal waited, patient, for the moment when courage alone would not be enough. The palace hall was filled again, but this time the mood was different. The nobles sat straighter, their jeweled hands clasped tight, their whispers hushed. Servants hurried to light every candle and polish every piece of gold until the hall glowed like the heart of the sun. Soldiers lined the walls, their spears gleaming. All eyes waited for the moment that had been promised, the one act that would prove whether Kate truly belonged among them. Kate entered slowly, the red train of her gown flowing behind her like a river of velvet. The child she had rescued from the burned village had been taken into safe hands, but the memory of her frightened eyes still clung to Kate's heart. She carried that weight with her now, each step echoing like a drumbeat across the polished floor. At the far end of the chamber, the monarch rose from his throne. His crown caught the light, sending glimmers across the ceiling. His deep eyes held hers, unreadable but watchful. He spoke, his voice carrying through the silence. "You have sworn loyalty. You have faced danger. But loyalty is not only words, nor is it survival. It is respect before the crown, before the court, and before the people. Today you will bow." The nobles leaned forward. Some smiled faintly, eager to see her stumble. Others frowned, unsure what this test meant. But they all knew it was no small act. To bow here, in this hall, was not to show weakness. It was to bind herself completely, to display humility before power while standing firm in dignity. Kate's breath slowed. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing against her, each one demanding something different. Some wanted her to fail. Some wanted her to bend too low. Some wanted her to defy the monarch and break the ritual. But she thought of the people, of the child's hand clutching hers, of the villages waiting for someone to stand in their place. She knew what she had to do. She stepped forward into the center of the hall. The sound of her shoes on marble seemed louder than thunder. She paused, lifted her gaze once more to the throne, and then slowly, gracefully, she lowered her head. Her body folded into a deep bow, every movement calm, controlled, and deliberate. The hall froze. No one spoke. No one breathed. The silence was so heavy, it seemed to press down on the very walls. Time itself felt caught in that single act. Kate's head remained bowed, her figure small against the endless pillars and banners. Yet her presence filled the chamber. The monarch did not move. His eyes narrowed, and for a long moment he stood utterly still. The pause stretched until it seemed unbearable. And then, for the first time, something changed. His hand, heavy with rings, clenched slightly at his side, as though even he had been caught by the depth of her bow. The monarch himself, the man who had faced wars and betrayals, paused in awe. The nobles looked at one another, unsettled. Some tried to whisper, but their voices caught in their throats. The guards shifted their weight, but did not dare move. The entire hall was wrapped in silence, every soul struck by the simple, undeniable power of that bow. Kate rose slowly. Her head lifted, her back straightened, and her eyes shone with quiet strength. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence itself was her answer. The monarch's gaze lingered on her. He finally spoke, his tone softer than before. The court has seen. The crown has seen. And history will remember. The guards struck their spears against the marble once, twice, 3 times. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. Yet even after it faded, the memory of that quiet remained heavier than the sound of war drums. Kate turned her eyes toward the nobles. She saw them differently now. Those who had doubted her shifted uncomfortably. Those who had mocked her lowered their gazes. Even those who still plotted could not hide that they, too, had been struck by the moment. But across the chamber, Lord Rennick's expression was sharp as a blade. His lips curved into the faintest smile, but his eyes glowed with anger. He knew what the others now felt. Kate was no longer simply a girl with an oath, she was becoming a symbol. And symbols were dangerous, for they could inspire where power alone could not. As the court dismissed, whispers rushed back like a tide. Some spoke of dignity, others of fear. Some said the silence had been holy, as though the gods themselves had watched. Others feared that silence more than war itself. Kate walked out of the hall with her head high. She felt no triumph, only the weight of what had passed. She had bowed, yes, but it had not been submission. It had been a promise that she would carry the crown's burden, even if it crushed her. In the corridors beyond, the monarch remained seated on his throne, his hand still resting against the armrest, as though frozen by the memory of her bow. For the first time in years, his court had fallen silent, not from fear, but from awe. And somewhere deep in the palace shadows, betrayal sharpened its knife, waiting for the right moment to strike. The silence of Kate's bow lingered in the palace for days. Nobles still whispered about it in corridors, servants repeated it in kitchens, and soldiers told the story at the barracks. Some called it courage, others called it dangerous. But none could deny the truth. She had captured the court's attention in a way no one expected. Outside the palace walls, however, the storm grew louder. Enemy banners rose near the borders, their armies pushing closer with every sunrise. Villages emptied, fields burned, and refugees crowded the roads leading to the capital. The people looked to the throne for answers, but whispers carried through the city that the kingdom's strength was failing. Kate saw it with her own eyes from the balcony of her chambers. The horizon was lined with smoke, and at night she could almost hear the distant rumble of drums. She pressed her hands against the cold stone railing, her heart heavy. She had sworn an oath, but what could she truly give against an army of thousands? A soft knock came at her door. When she opened it, Ulrich, the young soldier who had stood with her in the village, bowed. His armor was dented, his face tired, but his eyes still held respect. "My lady," he said. The king calls for counsel. He asks for you to stand among them. Kate followed him into the great chamber. Maps covered the long tables, weighed down with stones. Generals argued in loud voices, their fingers stabbing at lines of rivers and roads. Some demanded to hold the city. Others begged to ride out and meet the enemy head-on. The nobles were divided, their fear spilling into anger. The monarch sat at the end of the table, silent as always, listening to their quarrels. His eyes turned when Kate entered. He raised a hand, and the argument stopped. "You have walked among the people," he said. "You have faced danger beyond these walls. Tell me, Kate, what do you see in the storm that gathers?" Every eye turned toward her. Kate felt the weight of the court once more, but she did not bow her head. She stepped closer to the maps, her gaze fixed on the lines of fire drawn across them. "I see fear," she said quietly. "Not only in the enemy's strength, but in our hearts. Fear is spreading faster than their armies. If we lose to that, the war is already over." The room fell silent. Her words were simple, but they struck deep. Some nobles frowned, unwilling to admit their fear. Others lowered their eyes, ashamed. Lord Rennick's smooth voice cut through the quiet. "And what then, my lady? Do you suggest we fight fear with speeches? Shall we throw your bow at the enemy and hope they kneel in awe?" A few nobles laughed softly, but the monarch's eyes narrowed. He raised his hand, silencing Rennick without a word. Then he looked back to Kate. She met his gaze calmly. "No, my lord. Fear is broken by action. By showing the people we stand, not behind walls, but with them. If they see only nobles arguing and generals disagreeing, their hope dies. But if they see unity, if they see that crown, court, and commoner will fight together, then no army can break us quickly." The monarch studied her in silence. Then slowly he nodded. Spoken with clarity, murmurs rose across the table. Some nobles agreed reluctantly, others muttered in discontent. Rennick's smile sharpened. He leaned closer to his neighbors and whispered words Kate could not hear, but she felt their poison spreading. The council ended with no final decision, but the storm outside could not be delayed. That night, Kate walked again through the palace corridors, her thoughts heavy. Ulrich found her near the chapel, where tall windows cast pale moonlight across the floor. "You spoke bravely," he said. "But Rennick watches you. His words are daggers, and he means to cut deep." Kate turned her gaze toward the moon. "Then let him cut. An oath is not broken by whispers. If he seeks betrayal, it will be his, not mine." Ulrich lowered his head in respect. "The soldiers speak of you now. They say your bow was more powerful than 1,000 swords. They say the monarch himself paused. They are waiting, my lady, for someone to remind them what they fight for." Kate felt her chest tighten. She was no warrior, no queen. Yet the people's eyes turned toward her, as though she carried a crown already. It frightened her more than the enemy drums from the shadows beyond the chapel. Lord Rennick watched. His smile was gone now, replaced by a cold calculation. "If the people rise behind her," he whispered to himself, "then the storm within will be greater than the storm without." And storms can be broken. Outside the walls, lightning split the horizon. The rising storm was no longer a rumor, it was here. The test of loyalty was behind her, but the true trial had only just begun. **. The storm reached the palace gates sooner than anyone expected. Riders arrived breathless, their horses foaming with sweat. They carried grim news: villages had fallen, roads were blocked, and the enemy was only days away. The city braced itself. Walls were fortified, soldiers drilled through the night, and the people whispered prayers as though the gods themselves had abandoned them. Inside the grand hall, the council gathered again. This time, there was no laughter, no sly smiles. Fear hung over the nobles like a heavy cloak. The great table was crowded with maps covered in red ink, each line marking defeat after defeat. The monarch sat at the head, his face unreadable, his crown glinting in the candlelight. When Kate entered, silence fell. Her footsteps echoed across the marble as she approached the throne. She did not look to the nobles who watched her with narrowed eyes. She looked only at the king. "Your Majesty," one of the generals said sharply, "we cannot delay. We must appoint command. Someone must lead the defense of the capital." Murmurs filled the chamber. Names were thrown forward: old generals, proud nobles, men with decades of service. Each argued for themselves or for their allies. Each looked only at the throne, waiting for the monarch's choice. Then the monarch raised his hand. The noise died at once. His deep voice carried through the chamber. "The choice is made. The one who will stand for the kingdom, the one who will carry the weight of command, is she who swore the oath before you all." "Kate," the hall erupted. Nobles rose to their feet in outrage. Some shouted, some cursed under their breath. A few struck the table with their fists. "Impossible!" One cried. "She is untested!" Shouted another. "This is madness!" Kate's breath caught. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to remain still. The monarch's words rang in her ears, louder than the shouts of the court. "Lead the defense. Command." Lord Rennick's voice rose above the chaos, sharp as a blade. "Your Majesty, with respect, this decision cannot stand. You ask us to hand the kingdom's armies to a girl who has never held a sword. This is not leadership, it is suicide." The monarch's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained calm. She swore loyalty. She faced the fire when others hid. She bowed, and even I paused. She carries not a sword, but a weight none of you could bear. That is why the people will follow her. And that is why she will lead. The chamber shook with noise again, but Kate barely heard it. Her thoughts swirled, a storm of fear and disbelief. She wanted to speak, to refuse, to say she was not ready. But deep within, she felt the eyes of the people, the soldiers, the child she had rescued. They were waiting, the monarch's gaze fixed on her. "Kate," he said, his voice heavy with command. "Do you accept?" The hall grew silent once more. Every noble leaned forward, waiting. Even Rennick, his lips pressed thin, fell quiet. Kate's hands trembled at her sides. She thought of the oath, the test, the bow. She thought of fear, of hope, of the storm rising outside the walls. Then she lifted her chin, steadying her voice. "I accept," she said. Gasps filled the chamber. Some nobles collapsed back into their chairs, stunned. Others whispered fiercely, already plotting. Rennick's eyes burned with fury, but he smiled thinly, masking his rage. The monarch nodded once, as though he had expected no other answer. "Then let it be known. Kate shall bear the crown's command. The armies will march under her word." The guards struck their spears against the floor in thunderous rhythm, sealing the decision. Kate stood still, the noise rushing around her. Her acceptance felt unreal, like stepping into a dream she had never wanted. She was no general, no warrior. Yet now the lives of thousands rested on her shoulders. As the council dispersed, Rennick approached her. His smile was cold, his voice low. "Enjoy your crown of burden, my lady. When the storm breaks, it will crush you. And when it does, I will be there to pick up the pieces." Kate met his gaze. Fear twisted inside her, but she did not look away. "If the storm crushes me, it will crush you too. And the people will remember who stood and who hid." Rennick's smile faltered, just for a moment, before he turned and vanished into the shadows. That night, Kate stood on the balcony once more. The horizon glowed with fire. The storm was coming, and she could no longer hide from it. She had accepted the crown's choice. Now she had to carry it. She pressed her hands against the cold stone, whispering into the night. "Let me be enough." The wind carried her words away, but the weight remained. The rising storm would not wait for her doubts. And in the darkness below, The people of the city lit candles in their windows. They had heard the news already. Whispers spread faster than soldiers. The nobles might rage, but the people looked to her now. She was not just Kate anymore. She was their hope. The storm broke at dawn. Enemy horns sounded from beyond the hills, deep and dreadful, rolling across the fields like thunder. From the palace walls, Kate saw their banners rise, dark cloth marked with iron symbols, thousands of soldiers moving like a tide of steel. The capital city trembled as church bells rang, calling every man and woman to their stations. Kate stood in the command tower, her gown traded for a plain cloak, her hair tied back. She was no warrior, yet today the armies would march under her voice. Around her, generals shifted uneasily, waiting for her to falter. Lord Rennick lingered in the shadows, smiling faintly as if already preparing for her failure. The monarch stood beside her, silent, his crown heavy but his eyes firm. He had given her this role, and now he too waited to see what she would do. Kate's heart raced. She felt the weight of the entire kingdom pressing on her. Fear clawed at her, whispering that she was unfit. But then she remembered the child she had carried from the ashes, the soldiers who spoke of her bow, the people who lit candles in their windows. She remembered the silence of the hall when she lowered her head, and how even the monarch had paused. That silence had not been weakness. It had been strength. She stepped forward to the edge of the tower. Below, soldiers filled the square, their armor catching the morning light. Their faces were hard, but their eyes lifted to her. She raised her hand, and slowly, the noise of the army quieted. Her voice rang across the walls. Today they come with fire and fear. They come to break our homes, to silence our children's laughter, to take what is not theirs. But we do not stand here for walls of stone. We stand for each other, for our people, for every life that looks to us now. The soldiers stirred, their eyes brightening. She raised her voice louder. They think we will bow to their swords, but we already bowed to loyalty, to the crown, to our land. And from that bow came silence so heavy even kings were moved. That silence is with us now. Let it remind you fear will not command us. We will command fear. The square roared with voices, spears pounding against shields, the sound rising like thunder. Even the generals who doubted her could not deny the spark that had caught fire among the men. When the battle came, it was fierce and brutal. The enemy struck hard, their numbers vast, their blades sharp. The city walls shook under the assault. Yet the soldiers fought with a strength no one had expected. They fought not for gold, not for glory, but for the moment that Kate had given them, that quiet bow, that promise of loyalty. From the tower, Kate stood with the monarch, sending orders through runners, steadying the lines where they broke, encouraging the men when they faltered. She never raised a sword, yet her voice carried more weight than steel. Hours turned into a blur of smoke, screams, and fire. But at last, as the sun set in red light, the enemy horns sounded again, this time in retreat. The tide of steel broke against the city's walls. The storm was pushed back, the capital still stood. When the soldiers returned, weary but alive, the people poured into the streets. They lit torches and sang, not of generals or nobles, but of Kate, the girl who had bowed in silence, who had carried the crown's burden, who had stood as hope when the storm came. In the palace hall, the monarch sat once more upon his throne. The nobles gathered, their anger quieted by survival. Even Lord Rennick could not hide his defeat, though his eyes still plotted in silence. Kate stepped into the hall. She no longer felt small beneath the gilded pillars. She no longer trembled under the noble stares. She bowed once more, calm and steady. The hall fell silent again, just as before. This time, the monarch did not pause in surprise. He lowered his head in return, the crown tilting slightly as he gave her the respect no one else had earned. Gasps filled the hall. In that simple gesture, a new truth was written. Kate was no longer only a woman bound by oath. She was the symbol of the kingdom's endurance. From that day forward, the court remembered not only the battle, but the moment before it. They remembered the silence when Kate bowed, and how even the monarch had paused. That silence became legend, retold in songs and stories, carried from village to village as the memory of hope. Years later, when peace returned and the war was only a scar on history, people still spoke of her. Mothers told their children, soldiers told new recruits, and the halls of the palace echoed with the tale. They say she was not born to be queen, the people would whisper. She had no sword, no army, no crown. But when the hall fell silent and the monarch himself paused, we all knew she was the one who carried us through the storm. And in every corner of the kingdom, when people lowered their heads in prayer or respect, they remembered Kate's bow. The lasting memory of a moment so simple yet so powerful that even time itself seemed to stand still.